Hello and welcome everyone back to another episode of Backlog Reviews. Today's video is about Vampyr, a vampire RPG with Souls-esque combat set in England during World War I and the influenza pandemic. You are Dr. Reed, returning home from being a field doctor, but your ship sinks and a vampire saves you and then converts you. So now you find yourself seeking out the vampire who created you, as well as doing your best to blend into the town and avoid those who may wish to harm you. Also, while you're doing this, you're going to be doing your doctorly duties and doing your best to help the local citizens, but also you're going to have to do your best to satisfy your thirst for blood when you can. Today we'll be going over the same three topics as always in gameplay, story, and performance on the Steam Deck, and then giving the game a score out of 10 at the end. So for me, it took me 16.1 hours, I got 19 of the 28 achievements, and it took me about 2 months to get through the game, as I took a 3-week break from it due to personal frustration and becoming a bit disillusioned with the game, but I'll explain more why later. So starting off with the gameplay, it comes down to 3 different things. One being the combat, the dialogue, and then handling being a vampire, of course. So in regards to the combat, clearly Souls-like inspired, and if you've heard anything about this game in the past, you more than likely have heard of the combat as the least fun thing about it. Now, while I don't totally agree with that sentiment, as I didn't find it bad at all, what I found bad was that the enemy movesets at time can be kind of rough to deal with, as they can combo into one another, or they have some enemies that have splash damage / area effects that drain your health heavily and quickly. There's very few weapons in the game. You have to choose between dual-handed weapons and one-handed weapons that allow you to use guns as a sort of extra attack to whip out on occasion, like Bloodborne, but it honestly feels useless. Most weapons you're either going to find out in the open world, or on the rare occasion you can get them from a merchant, and there's very few weapons in the game to begin with. You have the choice between dual-handed weapons and one-handed weapons that allow you to use guns as a sort of extra attack to whip out on occasion, like Bloodborne, but it honestly felt kind of useless. I found a two-handed club early on and never went back. Guns take forever to reload, so trying to use them in combat can be very tedious, and I didn't really want to waste upgrade materials trying to incrementally improve myself because I just felt like it was going to take way too long. The regular enemies are fine, even if they're kind of bland. Both human and vampire enemies have one very specific mob that just sucks to run into due to their movesets and just how tedious they are to fight. The bosses are unique enough and they all play differently from one another. The boss you fight in the graveyard in chapter 3 though is just such a huge difficulty spike out of nowhere, and it just felt so out of place both story wise and based on how powerful they were given the context of their existence. No other boss gave me anywhere close to as much trouble as this one did, and it's actually a big reason why I took a hiatus from the game, as facing this boss was just far stronger than anything else I had encountered, and then would be stronger than anything else I would encounter, including the final boss. It just made me feel really overwhelmed, especially in an early part of the game, so it just felt extremely out of place. The game offers 3 difficulty modes, being story, normal, and hard. Story of course lessens combat encounters and how often you have to do it, while also nerfing everything else for a more story focused experience. Normal is normal, and hard is just, well, it restricts everything that you can do, basically. Now, with games like these that only offer 3 difficulties, I usually just go with normal, as I never really know what I'm going to get into. And I think the game does a really good job of keeping you on your toes, as enemies level up alongside you, so any enemy is capable of killing you if you let your guard down. So I think it adds a good level of tension to the game. There's no fast travel, which is annoying, but the map itself isn't huge, so it works as you're locked into a small town that has like a couple different districts you can travel to. When you're not in the safe zones of each district, navigating the cold streets of London is going to be a little difficult. You're going to have to deal with ghouls, vampire, werewolves, and a whole lot of other stuff running around. Alongside that, there's an ancient order of monster hunters trying to cleanse the town, which of course that includes you, but all this makes for some great atmosphere and storytelling. The issue lies in having to backtrack everywhere, which wouldn't be a problem if there was fast travel, but since there isn't, you constantly have to deal with respawning enemies waiting for you to go down the same corridor you've already gone down like 5 times, which you're forced to go through constantly. Yeah, you can't just run past them if you're quick enough, but given how the town is built, it can prove harder than it looks and just adds extra time to the game that without it would prove to be significantly shorter. Moving on though, let's talk about dialogue. The voice acting in the game is fine for basic conversations and such, but anytime they need to express some sort of emotion like pain or sadness, etc., it sounds so unconvincing and it's kind of cringeworthy. It doesn't help that the animated faces just look really bad. Like I'm talking like Mass Effect Andromeda before even that, like they just look worse, especially given the graphics are even worse as well. Something just to note. You do have a dialogue tree at times, and I do really want to emphasize at times, but far more often you just have prompts of things that you can say in any order, and most NPCs do have some hidden lore or secrets behind them that you'll gain XP for asking and finding out about, but to do so you have to find either notes or journals or talk to certain other NPCs, find out information about them to unlock these conversations. Honestly, it all felt very useless, and unless you're desperate for XP, which mind you it doesn't give you a lot of, or you just really want to find out everything you can about this world, go ahead for it, but unless you stumble onto these things, I really wouldn't put too much time into doing so, as the extra information you find out about these NPCs just doesn't have any real consequences and only exists to add some extra tidbits of lore that frankly really aren't that interesting. Now when it comes to being a vampire, it takes front and center because, you know, it's a vampire game, so it's supposed to, but but it does so in a lot of different ways that you may not expect. First and foremost, the RPG mechanics are completely tied to it. So essentially your blood level, which you increase by gaining XP or by just directly draining blood from human NPCs. Now this works in multiple ways. Of course you get some from combat, but also you can mesmerize NPCs and you can, put them into like a dark corner where no one else is looking and you drain them of blood. This of course is going to give you the highest amount of XP, especially in comparison to dealing with just like the scrub enemies. The only exception is that the bosses also give you a good chunk, but of course there's only so many of them. But how much XP you earn is completely tied to the health and the importance of that character that you're draining. So if you go and kill a homeless man who's sick, then you're not going to get a whole lot. It'll be a decent chunk, but not a whole lot compared to, let's say, a prestigious doctor at the hospital. Of course, that's going to be like 4 times the amount. Alongside that, of course, comes down to the quality of their blood. So what this means is that if the NPC that you're trying to drain is sick, and I mean like literally like sick, they're like coughing, they're sneezing, they have the flu, headaches, insomnia, whatever the case may be, it will directly impact the amount of XP that you'll earn from them. So as a doctor, of course, you can make cures along the way, and being a doctor, of course, that everyone knows, you can give these cures to the other NPCs that need them, and then later on come back and then drain them for the blood if you need to. Now, with that being said, you can't just go around mesmerizing everyone, assuming you even have the level to do so, and then go kill them in a corner. That's not how this works. Every time you kill an NPC, the stability of that district is going to change. It can go up, but it will most likely go down. So essentially what this means is that the higher risk the district is because you kill NPCs, it's going to shrink the safety zone. And if it gets bad enough, the entire district will just get flooded with enemies. The NPCs will leave, not get killed, and you just make everything worse for yourself. You'll kill the merchants, or they'll have less stuff, and so on. And if you do bad enough, it will just completely kill any safety zone in the area. And in case you didn't pick up on this, the more important a person is to a district, the more unstable it will become if you do end up killing them. Now, of course, the game is doing this to make things harder on you, but if you really want to, you can just grind it out and just kill regenerative enemies. But in my playthrough, I did kill a handful of them. I tried to spread it out, and I did it based on how important I thought they were. Like, basically, if they wouldn't be missed, I figured it was okay to do so. And even in the late stages of the game, I killed a prestigious doctor because I could kind of tell the game was wrapping up and I wanted to like level up the best that I could. But of course, that district ended up falling apart completely. So then when I needed to go back to the hospital, I kind of screwed myself because I had to kill a bunch of enemies just to get to what I needed to. Personally, I did find the system to be really fun and unique because every now and then I would question, can I get away with killing this NPC? But all the same, like I mentioned earlier, you can just completely ignore it if you want to, but of course the game does nudge you into it. And of course I like the fact that the consequences of it do have some legitimate impact. Now, to talk about the story, don't worry, I'm not going to do any spoilers, but I'm just going to do my best to get the point across. So, essentially, you're a doctor coming back from the front lines of World War I, coming back home to London where your ship sinks and you're rescued, quote-unquote. A number of things happen to you pretty quickly, so because of all this, you go out to seek your maker and get answers as to why you were turned into one and what to do now. All of this, of course, is happening during the influenza-style disease that's being spread around and that's creating vampires and ghouls and so on. You, as Dr. Reed, are trying your best to find the source of the disease to cure it while also being chased down by this ancient guard of Templar kind of dudes to protect London from vampires. Through a number of twists and turns, you meet a flurry of characters, both who seek to help you and then also use you to further their own interests. You'll never really be aware of who wants what, so do your best to make your choices carefully as to whomstative you side with is going to change how the story goes. I thought the story was fine, and it surprised me with having some deep lore and explaining things really well as to how and why things happened the way they did. A handful of things caught me off guard, and while I do think they succeeded in doing what they're meant to do, there's also a huge section of the games that just drag on. There's a handful of side quests and storylines that you can find, but they don't really amount to anything. The payoff is simply just not worth the effort to complete them, and while the main story does wrap up nicely in the sense of being cohesive and making sense, mostly anyways, I found the final chapters of the game to be somewhat anticlimactic. The voice acting doesn't help, and oddly enough, I think the writers thought you'd care more about what's going on than you really do. The build up to certain things happening seems forced because we're asked to care about things and people that, quite frankly, we really don't have much reason to. Like, they even put a love story in between Dr. Reed and another vampire lady, but it just doesn't, work. There's just no history between them. There's no romantic movements. There's no nothing. Because she just doesn't really reciprocate anything. It's actually really weird, but they're doing all this in the middle of a whole lot of other stuff going on, and it just feels extremely out of place. And again, it's meant to be used as a sort of tool to build up the story, but it just doesn't land the way the developers intended it to. The final chapter expands on the origins of everything and the lead up to the whole pandemic happening, and while it does wrap up loose ends nicely, I did find it incredibly dull and it could have gone without it entirely, but that's more so due to the presentation of it all. Like I mentioned earlier, I became very abrasive towards completing the game, but seeing as I was already 2/3 of the way through, so I just chugged along to the finish line. I think my problem is the fact that the game starts off pretty good, but after chapter 3, it does this weird thing where it just tells you more about things rather than showing you or having you do things. And alongside that fact, it's the cooler aspects of the game, like the Ashelon Club, which I won't spoil, but basically it's a vampire society. Like those kind of things like took a backseat to other stuff, like the love story again, and it just felt super out of place because it's like, what are we doing here? But that's enough about the story. I really can't talk about it too much without spoiling anything. So we're going to move on to the graphics. The game holds up pretty well on Steam Deck as I was playing on max settings and ran a consistent frame rate of between 40 to 50 on average. There were a couple dips here and there, but like they were in ultra specific areas and they were more so just due to texture pop-ins, I think they were. Like I never had problems with that like during combat. And of course it was just for like a second or two. It looks like an early Xbox One or PS4 game. While it lacks a deep color palette, it does make sense given the atmosphere and overall tone of the game is going for. Also, you being a vampire so you can only go out at night kind of furthers the idea for why they have so many harsh colors and dark lit areas. But by all means, I thought the game looked pretty good and I have no complaints from it aside from certain character models look really stiff. Like Lady Ashburn just does not look like a person. I know she's like a vampire, but all the same, like she just looks really weird. But I really don't have much more to say about this, guys. So I think we're going to move on, and I'm going to say that this game does have a pretty strong base to build itself off of. The devs clearly knew what they wanted to do, and I thought the writers wrote a pretty cohesive story that makes sense from start to end. The gameplay mechanics all work cohesively with one another. They have actual value to them. The progression does feel good for the most part, and there's plenty to find and discover. My biggest gripe with the game comes down to two different things. A, Chapter 3 absolutely dragging its feet so heavily and taking so long to advance the story, like 2 inches, which again, I had to just drop the game for so long because after like a certain section of the game, I was just like, what am I doing? Like this game is losing the plot so far right now. Now, when I bring this up, I don't say this to warn people from playing the game because I do think it has reason to be played. I'm just saying this that I had this personal experience with it and I felt like it's important to mention. And again, aside from the story not moving anywhere because we get sidetracked, the main boss battle in Chapter 3 has such a massive difficulty spike for no reason, and it just had no reason to happen. When I tell you that there was 0 in-game consequences afterwards, I really do mean 0, and I felt stupid after having to deal with that for so long. It took me over an hour to beat it, and in a game like this, it just makes me feel like I'm wasting time. Because the combat isn't bad, it's just very mid. Secondly, while I understand having regenerating enemies and why it's important to do so, it's also incredibly infuriating when you're forced to fight them over and over and over again because you're not allowed to open a gate or a door if they're nearby because you're in trouble so you can't open it. Ooh. So the easier ways that you could in theory circumvent them or create shortcuts of sorts, they just are locked behind these gates and doors that again you can't open because they just happen to be too close to you. Mind you, these gates and doors are just fake loading screens, like they only exist to break up the districts and allow the game to load itself in. It's especially annoying after some boss battles when you're trying to leave that enemies will just be outside waiting for you. So having to deal with that is just super annoying because you're just trying to get back to whatever district you need to. Lastly, Chapter 6 just felt like one big boss rush, which I think is perfectly fine as I really don't mind that in games. But the pacing of it just goes from 20 to 80 miles an hour out of nowhere. And then Chapter 7 just comes to a screeching halt and it just felt like it was utterly pointless. It's the chapter that basically gives you the origins and the explanation as to how the pandemic happened. Again, for me, when I got to this point, I just didn't even care anymore. I was just like, okay, so the game isn't over, so let me just finish it. Also, I should mention that in this chapter, you have to do this really obtuse puzzle that frankly just feels so out of place because you never have to do anything like that in the game anywhere else. So in the end, I would give Vampyr 6. I think it's one of those games that the studio definitely had a strong vision for and what they wanted to make, and it's a certain type of game for a certain kind of person. That person just wasn't me, unfortunately. Nothing about the game is done poorly aside from some character models not looking great, but everything else from the story, the graphics, RPG mechanics, and so on, I think was done pretty solidly. Again, the game just didn't land for me. It kind of reminds me of finding an old school diner and thinking, oh, okay, this could be good, and then you go in and it's just incredibly mid. It's not bad, it's just mid. And that's what I think Vampyr is. Nice and shiny on the outside, but just really mid when you're playing the game. And it's really unfortunate that I felt that way, because I felt like there was more here that I just wasn't seeing. But I think that's going to do it for today, guys. Let me know in the comments down below. Have you played this game? Do you want to play this game? Did I scare you off from this game? Let me know about any of your thoughts down in the comment section down below, and I'll see you all in the next one.